on the East Coast. This is Lisa Harnish with Certification Partners. We are here for today's CIW webinar. We're going to be talking about JavaScript and using JavaScript for fun and profit in the workplace, a report from the industry. I'm here with Dr. James Stanger and with Ashley Kraft. James, you want to say hello?
You bet. Hello, everybody. And I'm happy to be here. And Ashley, it's great to have you here. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Good, good. So I guess we can go ahead and get started. Is that right, Lisa? Or do you want to talk about a couple of housekeeping items first?
Yeah, let me go ahead and cover a couple of things. For all of our attendees out there, you are muted by default. That's so that we can keep your background chatter to a minimum and not distract from what James and Ashley have to say today. If you have any questions, by all means, go ahead and post those into the questions tool in your GoToWebinar panel. If I can answer those questions for you, I certainly will. If not, I'll hold them for James and Ashley and make sure that they address them before the end of the event. Also, all attendees will receive a PDF of our slide presentation today, later on today or tomorrow, as soon as I get that file. So you will be getting a copy of these slides, just so you know. All right.
Great. Well, thanks, Lisa. Ashley, let's go ahead and get going then. If everybody could take a look at the agenda. First, we'll start out with a little blurb about what CIW is, for those of you who don't know. Then, Ashley will be talking to us about how JavaScript is used in the industry and some of the latest things that have been going on. And then we'll be going into the new exam, take a look at the objectives, some questions, the learning resources, and how to prepare for the exam. And finally, we'll be ready to answer any questions that you have about the exam. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, what is CIW? Well, it's a skills-based education program, and it takes a holistic approach to teaching the best web technologies that are out there. We provide courses and certification exams that help teach people and then help people prove that they know important web technologies in web development and design. And so we put people on a lifelong learning path, not a vendor's product treadmill. We're vendor neutral, so we take the best vendor applications and all the skills that are important as judged by industry. That includes open source as well as vendor applications from, let's say, Adobe and Microsoft. So we take a competency and skills and job role-based approach to education. We're a globally accepted program with over 65, more like 70,000 certified individuals these days. It's a program that's created by web experts for newbies, but also for web experts. And a community of web professionals, instructors, and technologists have gotten together to create this program. And we have a global presence, not just in the U.S., not just in Europe, but a global presence in Asia. We do teaching in Africa and elsewhere. It's designed by education experts as well. We listen very carefully to folks from the universities, community colleges, and high schools, basically to make sure that we allow as many people to understand web technologies as possible. And with our whole approach, we try to get people caught in the web, as it were, so that they they learn how to enjoy these web technologies so that it's fun, but also that they're challenged. We have an advisory council of people that we work with regularly to make CIW what it is. And it's a cross-section of industry and academia and non-for-profit organizations. And this includes Hitachi Soft in Japan, Mesa Community College, for which, Ashley, you do some work for, I think, and Kaplan University, the state of Florida, but also for-profits, Google, Certiport, Intel, and others. We listen very carefully to their feedback so that we can learn more about how to improve CIW. Well, as a result, Internet.com, for example, has named CIW as a top developer service, one of the top 5 certifications that puts developers on the fast track. And CIW's web developer programs came in at number 3, right behind Oracle and I think it was, Oracle, Sun, and Microsoft. And the point was, when you work with CIW, when you combine the in-demand skill sets and then the proven technologies that are there and the proven salary impact, CIW is a very important certification for people to get. And you can read the full internet.com article once you get this PowerPoint slide sent to you. We'll be sending it to you in PDF format. We also have some recent government acceptance of CIW. For example, the United States Department of Defense has many initiatives, and one of them is the 8570 initiative, which is basically designed to make sure that as people use Department of Defense computers, they better know how to use them. And that means developers and designers as well. And so we have been put on the 8570 list, and there's a URL given there. For years, the Scottish Qualifications Authority has also accepted CIW, and they just revised and added some more things as of this past December. We're also been on the GI Bill for years in the United States as well. So that allows active and former military to become CIW certified and get reimbursed for that. So we have continuing momentum being built about CIW. So there's the overview. I've tried to get over that in record time, so I'm glad everybody's still here. So Ashley, let's talk a bit about how JavaScript is used in the industry. Ashley, tell us a bit more about yourself. She is our web architect working for certification partners. She has many certifications. She does a bit of teaching, and she has worked in the industry for years. But tell us a bit more about your experience first, Ashley, and then we'll get into here and talk a bit more about JavaScript.
Well, actually, you covered a lot of it.
I'm pretty good at that.
Yeah. I've been developing websites for quite some time now. I think going on 13 years, working with JavaScript specifically, close to 10. There have been so many changes over that decade in what JavaScript actually has done and what is utilized for. In addition to that, I have all of the certifications that Certification Partners actually produces. In addition, also, I am a Sun Java certified programmer, I believe it is. That's the title they give you.
That's how I remember it. I think so, yeah.
Amongst a couple other miscellaneous certifications I also hold as well. I've also done some teaching over at Mesa Community College for the various CIW classes.
Well, it's great to have you here, and also you have been a subject matter expert for our CIW JavaScript Specialist exam.
Oh, that's true. I can't believe I forgot that.
Another thing to put on the resume, man. So, well, let's talk a bit about what has caused developers to continue to rely on JavaScript. It certainly has remained stable over the years. It's also had a lot of really cool additions that we'll be talking about, but it definitely has a secure history. Does it not? Right? It's the glue that holds things together. As a developer, what has it done for you lately?
Well, as a developer, there are a lot of interesting additions that JavaScript is now able to bring to the table. Some ways that it previously wasn't used before, such as Ajax, which has actually been around for a long time, but has really gained that momentum in the last couple of years because it's been working better on browsers and has caused a lot less issues as code has started to become standardized.
So yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting about JavaScript is that there are all these pieces that have been around. For example, pieces of Ajax and things like that that kind of get discovered and rediscovered over time. And we'll be talking about that, I think, here shortly. But one of the things that's interesting, I think, about JavaScript is that because it's been around a long time, developers certainly trust it. And it allows you to do quite a few creative things. Tell me a bit more about some of the creative things that you often do with JavaScript. I think one of them has to do with, for example, lately, last year or two, pages fading in and out, the ability for pop-ups, to do creative things with them. Tell me a bit more about how you can use CSS and JavaScript to do that.
With JavaScript, you do have the ability to work pretty closely with CSS to create those fun effects, such as the pages fading in and out so that you can give more emphasis to a pop-up. In addition, JavaScript has also started to see the appearance of libraries such as jQuery, amongst others, that allow developers to quickly implement neat little effects like that where the opacity changes or things slide in and slide out and interact with the user in a much more rich desktop application kind of feel.
So you're the one responsible then for when I want to read my article that a pop-up comes up and I can't read it anymore? Are you the one to blame?
Well, I'd love to say that I control all JavaScript across the board throughout the world, but my reach is just not that far. But JavaScript probably could be to blame if that pop-up has popped up due to any event that you've initiated.
What's great about this, about JavaScript too, is that right, it's a vendor-neutral technology, right? It's available in all browsers, and saying right. Well, I shouldn't say all browsers, but most browsers and most platforms support it, right? Also, end users seem to support it. You had a point that you were talking to me a couple of days ago about how there are some technologies that end users just never quite trusted or picked up on, but JavaScript seems to be one that everybody's reasonably happy with. Is that about right?
Well, a lot of the misconception that JavaScript was a problem occurred because browsers were not supporting it as they should. A lot of browsers have actually gotten better about their implementation of JavaScript and how it interacts with the user by making sure that it can't annoy the user. JavaScript is a very powerful language, and if you allow it, it can go bonkers. But that's true of any language if you don't put it in proper restrictions. Some of the most common ones several years ago were pop-ups that would continuously pop up and interrupt your user experience. Now browsers will warn you that there are pop-ups occurring. Do you want to see them, or do you want to prevent this page from creating any more? And that's allowed people to be more comfortable with the interaction JavaScript has with the browser as opposed to just shutting it off by default because it's more trouble than it's worth.
So the interaction then has gotten more sophisticated, and users are comfortable with that. And I like how you use the term "go bonkers." It's almost like, in some ways, right, that it's the developer that goes bonkers as much as the language itself, right? I mean, in other words, developers, if they get too in love with whatever pop-up or whatever JavaScript usage, right, they can, lose focus.
It's pretty much a comparison between a developer that means to be malicious and a developer that is accidentally malicious. Whereas pop-ups can start reoccurring because the developer has forgotten to properly close the loop. That could be a problem where now a browser will be able to stop that from crashing somebody's computer or creating an unresponsive system. Whereas other issues are that, yes, the developer did want to annoy the user or take over their system or cause any sort of unpleasant experience.
Cross-frame scripting, or all the bad stuff that can happen, right?
Yes, it ultimately is up to the developer. It's never the programming or scripting language's fault. But with it being able to just run willy-nilly and do whatever the language is capable of, that's where you can wind up with accidental issues.
So there's never the case where JavaScript made me do it, huh?
No, it doesn't hold people hostage.
Yeah. Well, hopefully not, the tail wagging the dog. Well, let's talk then about some of the newer types of things that have been going on. jQuery is hardly, today's news or whatever. It's been around a bit, but it's an important addition to JavaScript. And so as a developer, what has it done for you and other libraries for that matter? What are the, the coolest things about it?
Well, the great thing about libraries is that somebody else has already created the code for you to do something really nifty on your site. So you don't have to spend hours troubleshooting, making sure it's cross-browser compatible on everything. For the most part, the very simple scripts that jQuery and other libraries have work really well throughout different browsers because there are many developers working on them. Although it's not guaranteed that they're going to be cross-browser compatible, you should always make sure that it's working in all of the browsers that your users tend to utilize. It does save a lot of development time not to have to recreate the wheel.
So, the whole idea is that you've got a lot of very interesting and creative libraries that you can bring in, or functions and tools that bring in through jQuery, for example, and you can bring them in quickly. You can also customize them, right, so that you're not looking like everybody else. Isn't that right? You know what I'm trying to say by looking like everybody else? If you use the same tools as everybody, then you're not unique. But with jQuery, you can do your own additions. Isn't that right?
Well, that's true. You can customize jQuery. It does allow for you to change things like colors in most of the instances for the scripts.
Okay.
But you can go even further and develop your own plugins that can actually work in conjunction with the jQuery library so that you can get even more of a powerful user interaction with those codes.
Now, and with these libraries, what other libraries do you tend to use? I think you and I were talking maybe yesterday or the day before. You said you'll use any library that you can as long as you're reasonably comfortable that it works in various platforms. But are there other ones that you tend to work with besides just jQuery?
There was MooTools and also Spry. I like that one as well. There are a couple others. Really, it's what you want to choose the library that does the job well. Some libraries are better at visual transitions, some are better at validation, and you want to use the one that is known to be good at what you need it to do.
Okay, very good, very good. Now, we mentioned Ajax earlier, Ashley. This is kind of the practice that has ensured JavaScript has remained a very important technology. And Microsoft introduced years ago the HTML HTTP request object. But tell me a bit more about the significance of this and why Ajax is considered to be, so cool. Don't tell the whole audience about, the more sophisticated ways in which browsers and servers work together with this object.
Well, the really nice thing about Ajax is that you do not have to wait for the server to respond with a full page from an HTTP request in order to get your information back. Back in the days of dial-up, where it could take 30 seconds to a minute, depending on how large the page was, sometimes even more if there were images, it could be really cumbersome just to hit a form submit button and have to wait and see if you made any errors because the server's churning through and sending it back. With Ajax, it's sending light little touches to the server to retrieve information, so it's almost like you're typing into a computer platform, a desktop platform application. You get that instant feedback. You can get suggestions for words that you're typing in. You can get instant feedback on whether or not your password has enough characters in it, if it's complex enough, if it's actually going to the server to check that. You can also transition between images without having to refresh a visually rich page. So it's really taken the load off of not only the bandwidth, but the server, and allows for that instant gratification of seeing your information right there.
See, I think that's the key thing, is that instant gratification comes not only just from a client-side script, right, which is fine and everything, but the fact that it's communicating with the server, and so that you have a true, kind of relationship going on with the server through your browser that is, rich and interesting to the user, but also is something that's not just a surface thing, right, that is just happening right in the browser. It's also communicating with the server is a big deal. And I think that goes back to the whole idea of what people have been trying to do with browsers for years, because browsers are effectively stateless, right? They usually, they have to communicate in, constant, how do you want to call it, datagrams, as it were, or, sorry, you're talking to kind of a plumber here, networking plumber more than a programmer. But it kind of, communicates in constant spurts, as it were, rather than one continual stream. But what's happening with Ajax is it makes it possible for you to imitate a more of a stateful or a constant communication. I don't know. Is that anywhere near clear?
Yeah, I agree with you that the industry is trying to make it so that web applications seem more like they're natively on the system, as opposed to having to send out to a separate system for information. The client-server model, where you can have a dummy computer, but it needs to get all of its information from the server, which could have some latency issues. In this instance, we're trying to make it seem more like that computer is controlling everything.
So you have the ultimate thin client going on here, something that is capable of delivering really rich content. and yet without burdening the server. And you also don't have to install an application everywhere you go. As long as you have a browser and a pipe, you're looking good.
And it reduces security issues as well, because if your browser is secure, you don't need to download anything that you would if it were a desktop application. It stays in your browser, and you can interact with it that way.
And so JavaScript allows you, using XML, using HTML, and then, of course, JavaScript to create these types of solutions. How is it that Ajax is more scalable in doing this than other, the classic web application model or installed application?
Well, it's more scalable because it is doing those small little pieces of information as opposed to a full push towards the server. So with those smaller pieces, you are able to actually grow larger into the amount of users than if you go from 10 to 1,000 and you don't have anything that can do small little hits back and forth, then you're going to probably be doing full page pushes and information pulls back. Whereas Ajax, it can just ask a quick question and refresh.
And so this way, too, not only is it secure and scalable, but it's also ready for the cloud, as it were, right? Being able to work with all sorts of third-party applications and providers, whether it be Amazon.com services or whatever. Is that about right?
It is a possibility, especially if you tie them in with web services or APIs. You would be able to get that cloud feel to your applications.
If so necessary, right?
Yeah. It's a possibility.
Okay. Well, let's talk a bit about using JavaScript to update XHTML on the fly. Why is that important for developers, and how often, personally, have you been doing this over the years, Ashley?
Oh, changing HTML on the fly has been going on for quite a long time. Whenever a user clicks a button or moves their mouse over a certain area, you can have your DOM react in order to show the user new information that is reactive to whatever process they're in the middle of. But it's very important, again, for that rich user interaction, because users want to see immediately if something is going to happen on the page, not wait to see the refresh button cycle around and, oh, wait, now the page is fully loaded. Oh, yeah, I did incorrectly type my name in there. I need to change that. They want to be able to see as they're typing it in if, oops, I accidentally hit a number key in my first name field, and now it's going to reject it. It's a lot quicker to give the feedback to the user, and they can correct any information they're adding or any actions that they're performing if it's instantaneous like that.
Yeah, very good, very good. Now, when it comes to working with forms, JavaScript has the ability to do this in fairly sophisticated ways. And again, that's something that's been around for some time, right? But it seems like lately in the industry that working with JavaScript and forms seems to have received a bit more emphasis. Is that right? Or is it just something that's been important to know for a long time?
It's actually been important for a long time, but now that JavaScript has matured a little bit more, you do see more interactive feedback in forms, such as when you go to sign up for a new account, a lot of pages now will warn you if that username has already been taken. That way you don't have to keep hitting submit to see, oh, is this username taken? Nope, got to choose another one. You're able to see, oh, okay.
The good old days. I remember that. I love that. Again and again and again, right? Whereas this time you're saying that it's updated on the fly for you.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Very good. And is this similar to having JavaScript work with databases? Or are we talking about basically as you make a database call, you can embed that within a JavaScript function?
You can have JavaScript react to database calls in instances where you are looking to see if a username is already taken. Then it probably is Ajax behind the scenes making that call to the database to see if there's anything that matches what you've typed in.
Okay. Okay. So this is something that you often do when it comes to working with databases?
It's one of those things that's a nice to have. I wouldn't say that I use it in all of my forms, but in some of the more sophisticated forms that require checking to see if a username has already been has already been used, or if in fact somebody has already signed up because their email matches one that's already in the system, then that is definitely a good place to use it.
Interesting, interesting. Now, as we've talked about various things, whether it be updating XHTML on the fly, working with forms, and then we talked about jQuery, and also about Ajax. It would seem that troubleshooting JavaScript, then your ability to do that would have to be, you'd have to beef that up. You'd have to really become more sophisticated in your approach to troubleshooting JavaScript. Is this right? I mean, you can't just rely on the debugger, right?
No, the debugger is very helpful. It's just that it's not always exact on where the error is. Sometimes it will be a little misleading where the error might be. I've had debuggers that have told me that blank lines were the actual error in the JavaScript, and of course that's not what's actually going on. In addition, you can also have errors in your logic, which a debugger is not going to help you with.
Right, because the debugger is just going to be going through line by line and saying you missed this particular syntax, rather than the actual, the logic is something that maybe Watson, right, the IBM computer that seems to beat everybody at Jeopardy. Maybe Watson would be able to figure something out, but I don't know. I don't
then it needs to become a JavaScript debugger.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind if it decided to take that job on.
I'll tell you what, we'll get with Alex Trebek and IBM, and we'll see what happens. So, it does then become, because you're using JavaScript in ever more sophisticated ways, you have to make sure that you emphasize your troubleshooting pretty carefully, I would imagine. Well, now before we start moving on about the JavaScript Specialist cert, is there anything else you'd like to add about some of the things that you do with JavaScript on a regular basis you'd like to share with everybody?
Well, a lot of the really exciting parts of JavaScript right now are, again, the user interaction and making the transitions between pages or entering information smoother so that you don't lose the interest of your user. You can use that JavaScript to add more interest, and that's pretty exciting.
Very good, very good. By the way, one thing that you mentioned before in some of our conversations is how browsers and JavaScript both work very well these days, in that you can have something fancy, something sophisticated, yet if it fails pretty gracefully, right? And a good developer will make sure that that happens.
It definitely does rely on the developer helping it fail gracefully, but even if the developer hasn't thought of that, the browsers have gotten more sophisticated to keep that from hanging up a page, or allowing people to know that, yes, there's an error, but it's very nicely placed at the bottom of the browser, as opposed to the pop-ups that used to occur all of the time to let you know that there's something wrong with the page.
Very good, very good. Well, Ashley's a very good example of the people that we've spoken to as we've updated the CIW JavaScript Specialist cert. So there have been some advances in it. There have been changes certainly in how industry uses it. There have been a lot of changes in regards to things like jQuery and Ajax, and we have received requests to make sure that the CIW JavaScript Specialist cert reflects that. And so we have a more code-based, real-world exam, and we also have courseware that meets the demands of developers who need to know JavaScript. So we have added essential programming concepts. We focused on debugging and troubleshooting, about how to change XHTML on the fly using code libraries. We've got an Ajax overview in the course now, and it's also discussed in the exam. We've expanded on security topics, talked about database connectivity, and the things that Ashley has reported to us. The kind of job roles that we've kept in mind for this JavaScript are people who are working towards becoming front-end JavaScript developers or user interface developers, those who work with JavaScript and jQuery. Traditional web developers, of course, are going to have JavaScript in their toolkit and ready to go. Also people who work for mobile platforms, and then front-end developers. All of these types of jobs, which you will find at DICE and Monster elsewhere, are going to be the ones who are going to be the jobs that you'll want to keep in mind as you take the certification exam. let's take a look at the exam details, what's going on there. First of all, it's called CIW JavaScript Specialist. The exam ID that you would enter for EdView or Prometric is 1D0635. We're looking to have this available as of April 11th, and it'll be available in View and Prometric centers worldwide, as well as our own CTC Online, which is where once you become a proctor, you can use a web browser and bring the same exact exam right into your classroom. It's a 90-minute exam. We've got 55 items for it, traditional multiple choice, A, B, C, D kind of approach, and with a passing score of 75%. When it comes to the other exam details, there's the old exam, the 435 exam, the one that's been around a while. It's still with us, and it will be available until Halloween. So the witching hour will be somewhere around October 31st. So for the old exams, so you can still study for both. It's certainly your choice for right now. Let's take a look at some of the new exam objectives. Let's drill down a bit. And Ashley, feel free to add in here any of your thoughts about the particular 4 domains for the CIW Specialist exam, JavaScript Specialist exam. So it's 4 domains. First, we stick with teaching people the essential principles and practices, declaring variables, working with functions, all the programming techniques that you would need to get started, loops, for example. Then we move people into more intermediate and then applied JavaScript, working with forms and things of that nature. Step 4, JavaScript technology extensions. That's where you're going to learn a bit more, well, a lot, about libraries such as jQuery, as well as Ajax, and then, of course, troubleshooting. So those are the 4 domains. Take a look at each of the individual domains. In domain 1, you start with programming practices, starting as basic as what it means to insert it into JavaScript into a page, declaring variables, of course, and then methods and functions. Then next, you start learning how to control program flow in the second of the domains, working with the document object model, which, of course, is essential, working with the existing language objects to create particular expressions and learning arrays. You'll also be able to learn how to use custom JavaScript objects, and then debugging and troubleshooting, of course. In domain 3, you'll learn about creating interactive forms, and then modifying XHTML, and then the security issues that can pop up. Finally, you'll be working with jQuery and other, well, mostly with jQuery, and then working with Ajax to learn how to create more interactive web applications. So it'll be a very nice introduction. The full list of objectives.
Sorry, I was just going to say, from an instructor point of view, although domain 3 and 4 definitely have really fun things in them, where you get to see where JavaScript can really spread its wings, you need to make sure that you completely understand domain 1 and 2 before you move on, because JavaScript being a scripting language, it's going to be very, very hard if you don't have those core fundamentals down.
So making sure, okay, so in other words, you have to build on the fundamentals. I mean, that's just kind of a standard, right? I mean, you've got to have those things. Okay. Now, speaking of fundamentals, there was this, I think, is somewhat relevant. We have a question from Robert, who is asking about what visual or object-oriented tools would you recommend, or would we recommend, to help simplify the JavaScript code creation process? Are there any visual tools that are useful out there, or as you just kind of said, no, you need to be getting into the code itself?
I would say you really do need to be getting into the code yourself. Personally, I use most of my JavaScript coding in Notepad if I need to do something small and quick. Dreamweaver actually isn't that bad when you're going to create JavaScript. It does highlight and show you basic syntax errors. But if you don't know the code behind it, it's really going to be hard to do the troubleshooting and finding those logic errors and other things that might hang you up.
Okay. Well, thanks, Ashley. The full list of objectives for this course is available up on CIWcertified.com, and we can get that to you as well, a list of those objectives, PDF of them. Let's take a look at some of the certification, the types of questions that you may see up there. And this one here is a pretty basic one. It starts talking about how to define a variable. And so this here is very much a syntax sort of question. Do you know the syntax that it takes to create a variable? And this is for objective 1.2.2, and the correct answer is delta D. Next, there's an objective here, 1.3.2, how to define functions. And once again, it asks you, how can you create a function here? And the proper answer is A, or alpha. With sample question 3, this is basically a statement that is creating a loop, as it were. It's a for loop, a for while loop, I think, isn't it? Ashley, tell us a bit more about this one.
It's just your simple for loop, and in this question, you need to make sure that you understand what the order is for the for loop. If you mix up the areas, like if you switch X with Y, you definitely are not going to get anything that works to your purpose.
Okay. Okay, very good, very good. Now this next question, pretty busy here on the screen. It's for objective 3.1.7, talking about the radio object. Let's take a look at the following code here, where it's asking what your favorite color is. Give you a couple of seconds to look at it, everybody. And the question for this code is, which method can be used to change the value of the first button? And then you have 4 options. Now, Ashley, why is Charlie the correct answer? And this has to do with arrays and zero-based counting, right?
Well, actually, this question does test 2 different things. It tests whether or not the user can find the object, properly reference the object, and get the value for it, and in that value switch it. But it questions them on whether or not they know arrays. And in an array, counting starts from 0, and that's one of the reasons that C is correct, because it starts at 0 and you're after the first button. So there are a lot of questions that are on the exam and in the practice exam that help you learn more than one specific objective.
Very good. And so, in other words, this goes back to the point that this is a very code-heavy exam. You need to know, as a coder, how these things work. And it's not just a simple, oh yeah, it's a, declare an word or whatever, or declare a variable. It asks you in a very context-specific way how things are working.
A lot of the SMEs are programmers in different languages, and so the distractors can be formed in ways that if it were a different language, that would be correct. But you need to know specifically how JavaScript works in order to pass the exam.
Very good. Very good. The next question here is, I think, kind of a similar sort of idea. Can you walk us through this one, Ashley?
In this situation, again, it's bringing up whether or not it's an array. But in the previous question, you saw that you had the keyword value, which allowed you to change or to select based off of that. In this, you're going to see that it's pulling something up by its ID, namely being select, and that the object options is now an array, and that you need to pick which one it is from there. And that's why B is correct, because it's referencing 2, which would be the third option if you start counting from 0.
Pretty good. Now, on the this next item, you were taking a look at some code here, so that the question comes on the next slide. But let's take a look at this code here first. And then there's a function that's being declared in the second set of bold code. Now that you've taken a bit of a look at this, let's go on to the actual question. And what we've got here is that code basically checks for text to hyperlink in the span tag, right? And then if it's not, is it right, it's not found, then the text is set to no links. Tell us a bit more about this particular question and what it's asking for, Ashley.
Could you back up to the actual question itself?
You bet. Maybe I can't. Hold on here.
Okay, in this question,
now?
Yeah, thanks. In this question, you need to know how to find an object in the DOM based by its ID, and beyond that, you need to be able to check to see what the value is of the HTML within that tag. So not only do you have to call the tag, but now you're trying to see if there's anything within it. So it tests you on both those levels. And then you have to see if there is anything in there, then you're going to perform an action. If not, then it's just going to simply state there are no links and continue on. So it helps you also to figure out program logic by looking at questions like this.
Very good, very good. And going back to your point earlier, as a troubleshooter, not only syntax but logical errors, you need to track those.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, and there's, in this case, Objective 4.2.5 has to do with an AJAX-related question. Why don't you walk us through this one, Ashley?
Well, actually, this is just a very simple question. You need to know what the actual states are for AJAX in order to perform any actions based off of them. The correct state values are 0 through 4. And those will be what you're utilizing when you're trying to pull in information and display it to your user.
Very good. Now, you've just seen a few questions, and what we've done, a few questions similar to what goes on in the exam. And one thing I'd like to point out is we have a lot of learning resources available. Of course, the courseware itself in PDF or book-based form. We also have a lot of online learning resources. And what we've done with the, for example, the sample questions, we've made sure that there's a very strong correspondence between the high-stakes exam and the learning resources. So the name of the course is now CIW JavaScript Specialist. We decided why not name the course the same as the actual certification. What a concept. So we've got that going. It has 13 lessons now, the course. Should take roughly the same amount of time. You may need to add some more material because we've added material having to do with jQuery and AJAX. Let's take a look at the titles anyhow for each of the lessons. So we introduce JavaScript, how to work with it, what it means. We also then in lessons 2 and 3 work with variables and functions. Lesson 4 talk about controlling program flow, for example, loops. Then comes the document object model and working with objects in lesson 6. Lessons 7 through 13 is where we get a bit more in-depth, working with forms, in discussing the security implications of decisions that you might make, how to create custom JavaScript objects, changing XHTML on the fly, and then working with jQuery, for example, and then an AJAX overview, and then finally a real emphasis ending with troubleshooting. Of course, you'll learn about troubleshooting all the way through the course, but lesson 13 really hits that pretty hard. Now, the course outline and additional material having to do about the exam is going to be on the CIW JavaScript Specialist page at our website. And so go on up there to get more information. We also, on the instructor login site, will have a differences document available to discuss the difference between the old book and the new course book. But there are one of the more interesting things about this particular offering is that we have some good online support materials, and there are different types of users out there. Of course, we've talked, Ashley especially has talked about the need to get right in and start coding, learn hands-on, and I personally am more of a hands-on sort of learner. But there are also visual type learners and even people who learn well by lecture or different types of ways. And in this case, we have drag-and-drop exercises and flashcards that help visual learners and also people who like to learn a bit by memorization. So there are lots of different ways in which people combine different styles of learning, and we're aware of that at CIW. And so in addition to very good hands-on exercises, we have matching and quizzes and other activities. We also have the online practice exams that are basically you can buy them as a as a package, but you also oftentimes buy them separately from the courseware. And these online practice exams simulate the high-stakes exam environment and are very, very useful for preparing students to pass for the exam. So ask your account representative about that. Well, Ashley, I think right now is time to discuss a bit about ways, specific ways to prepare for the exam. And as a subject matter expert, I'd like to hear a bit from you about some of the things that people can do to prepare for the exam. Now, first of all, of course, you start with the objectives. Get in and start coding. Focus on troubleshooting. And, of course, learn how to define the variables and get the syntax going. And keywords and understand all that. What other tips do you have, Ashley, in regards to preparing for the exam?
I would say rereading the book, especially at the beginning modules, making sure that you completely understand how JavaScript works, in addition to doing the labs. The more you work with the code, the more you're going to be able to look at questions and say, well, I know for a fact that B and D can't be correct because that's just not how JavaScript works. And it'll help you narrow down what the correct answer is going to be. In addition, the practice exam will be invaluable because it was created in tandem with the actual exam itself, where it makes sure that those specific subjects are covered in the practice exam so that users will understand what subjects they need to study more.
Very good. Thanks. Thanks, Ashley. Additional things to consider are making sure you understand the document object model, the navigator window, the array, math and string. These are all very important things, and of course the form object. Learn how to make sure you understand your variables and constructs, which, as Ashley said, is at the beginning of the course. Understanding the XML HTTP request object. Can you call a function? Ask yourself these, fundamental questions. The difference between various methods, including alert, prompt, and confirm. And then knowing how to obtain and store and manipulate user input. All of these are very important items. Well, we have anticipated a few questions here, and we have a frequently asked questions page that you can grab up on the CIW JavaScript Specialist page. And one of them is that how long will a previous exam be available? And we stated that earlier, but it's worth stating again. And you'll be able to take that until Halloween of this year, 2011. If you've been using the old course, right, can you use the old textbook to study for the new exam? Now remember, you've got the old exam to take, and that's fine still. But if you want to take that new exam, you need the new course book. That would be the best way to go. As far as why we made these changes and how will it benefit students, this new exam is something that is going to prove that you know the latest and greatest JavaScript knowledge that's out there. That's the short answer. The new certification objectives are located up on CIWcertified.com at the JavaScript Specialist page, and everybody on this webcast will get a copy. You can also obtain a differences document, as we stated before, up on the Specialist page and also in the instructor section. And as far as timing to take the course, should take roughly the same amount of time, possibly 3 days for learning centers. Community colleges and universities can usually take a semester. High schools often take a year for this when they teach it. Finally, let's see, prerequisites. There are no formal real prerequisites for the CIW JavaScript Specialist course or certification, but we certainly would, you're going to need to know your XHTML code before you ever start. You don't need to know any JavaScript before this, but as far as recommendations, we would at least recommend foundations and then moving into CIW Design Specialist, and then after that, then get into JavaScript. That would be a logical progression. But of course, those who already know their design and a bit about development, they can get right into CIW JavaScript Specialist. When it comes to the online resources, once again, we have taken special care to make sure there's a very strong correspondence between the online practice exams, the flashcards, other materials, and of course the books and the high-stakes exam. So don't expect the exam to be easy, but we've definitely raised the bar with that exam, but we've also raised the quality of the learning resources very high as well. Very impressive stuff. And you can learn more about the CIW JavaScript Specialist exam from your account representative or, of course, at CIWcertified.com. So in summary, the industry continues, of course, to use JavaScript in ever more sophisticated ways, as Ashley has told us. Using feedback from industry, from people such as Ashley, we've updated the exam, the CIW JavaScript Specialist exam. And we've also updated the learning resources, the courseware and online support materials. And so we challenge you to prove your CIW, to prove your JavaScript development skills with CIW. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time. If you have any questions, you can certainly get a hold of us at this contact information. And of course, we can even offer up Ashley to answer any questions as well. For the next webcast, we're actually going to be doing a little blurb about HTML5, and that's coming up in May 11th and 12th. And so we recommend that you vote early and vote often. No, that you come on in as quickly as possible and register for these webcasts. So thank you all very much for your time. Ashley, I want to thank you so much for the attention that you've provided and told us a bit, your perspective on what's going on in the industry.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Anytime. Anytime. And let's see. Well, I don't know what kind of questions that we might have. Lisa, what kind of questions do we have thus far?
It's been pretty quiet in the questions panel today. We did have a question from a candidate who had to leave a little early, but he was asking if there's what object-oriented visual tools are recommended to simplify the JavaScript code creation process.
Yeah, we had addressed that a little bit earlier. Ashley's answer was that in Dreamweaver, there's a fairly interesting way of that it does a pretty good job of checking syntax. But she tends to stick with Notepad or a good editor and learning the code itself. Is that a fair summation, Ashley?
Well, the syntax help is always good. I personally am not the biggest fan of visual designers, because the code behind it can be something that you weren't intending.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Any other questions, Lisa?
Not that are posted in the questions panel at this point in time. If anyone thinks of something later on that they want to ask, they're certainly free to email us, and I'll try to pass it on to someone who can answer it for you. But it's been a much quieter session today compared to yesterday.
Yeah, yeah. But I want to thank everybody for their time in coming in and learning more about the CIW JavaScript Specialist certification. And I think without any further ado, I'll hand the time back over to you, Lisa.
All righty. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. We do appreciate it, and we'll go ahead and consider this wrapped up.
Take care, everybody.